for the next panel, we have George Kurian, Director and Vice President, Supply Chain, Logistics and Customer Service, Africa, India and Middle East region from Michelin. We have Dr. Hanaa, Senior Cluster Leader, Middle East and Pakistan Integrated Supply Chain from Mondelēz International. We have Mohamed, Industrial Operations Supply Chain Director at Electrolux and Managing Director at ASCP. We have Komal, Ashu, S&OP Inventory Control and Global Supply Chain Analytics from Amway. And Kunal Gupta, Director of Supply Chain from Bateel. I would request Kunal to kindly lead the discussion and also request
Jaisal, and welcome all the panelists. I'm very excited to have such a versatile panel of fellow members along here. I think it's interesting to see how we have, we'll gather in about an hour, 60 minutes or so, a perspective from various industries, which is automobile to I don't know, snacking industry, if I can put it that way, Dr. Gomaa. Yeah, I think I won't call it FMCG. Yes. I mean, being yes. in food industry, yes, snacking industry, they are the leaders, I think, global leaders. Komal with the world leaders in multi-level marketing. So, and then we also have white goods, Mohamed. So I think it's a very versatile kind of panel. So I'm quite excited for that. I think we'll begin with, I'll kind of give a brief to our audience who've just joined on what are we looking at out of this session today. So let's kind of go over the topic once again. I mean, we are talking about demand sensing versus forecasting versus agility. I mean, essentially what I think in the next 45-50 minutes we are going to go through is what is exactly demand sensing for all of us with the different areas and different industries. How is it different from our traditional forecasting? What is the impact of this either demand sensing or forecasting to the agility, which is the name of the key ingredient today in our supply chain industry? And what are the plans in terms of, is demand sensing here to stay? Is it the future of demand and supply planning, or do we have some latest new techniques? So I think with that, I'd like to kind of maybe begin with a very broad or a common question to all panelists. We can start with, what is demand sensing to each of you? I mean, we'll go in the order. How is it different from traditional time series forecasting? And what do you think? Is it the need of the hour? Have you been always using it, or you think it's just because of pandemic we have kind of switched to that, or do you think it's there to stay? So probably we can start with George. What does automobile think about it? Let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Kunal, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone, depending on where you are. So it's a relevant question with no right answer. In terms of demand sensing today, I think the question is, the million-dollar question is more around what will drive your demand tomorrow and what will your demand be. I think we all agree, and I'll be happy to hear from the other participants as well, that probably what worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. And so the big million-dollar question will be, where are your markets going and what are the indicators you would use to pretty much forecast your demand? So taking a cue from that, for me, demand sensing is more about in the present world, how do you ensure that you can ensure business continuity in the short term, and that you prepare with your partners on business across the longer term in a scenario that is not black or white and that could potentially remain gray over the next few months to come on different markets that we operate on.
Couldn't agree more. So Dr. Gomaa, what are your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I think when we talk about demand sensing for different industries, it will reflect, it will have different impact, especially when we talk in FMCG industry with different categories. Specifically in snacking, every day there are new players, new competition happening in the market, new deals or offers and promotions, and how the consumers are reacting to it. All of that is something definitely crucial to capture and to understand. So it depends on which industry, but definitely I feel demand sensing now is more crucial than before. And this is something which we need really as all multinational companies to focus on and to start exploring in different areas, definitely.
Yeah, I think you took out a very good point of the consumer behavior. I think that is something which is very it's completely changed, and it's affected a lot of industries. Of course, snacking, FMCG. I'm sure Komal, with you in multi-level marketing and end consumer, what do you think? How has it? What has it been for you in terms of demand sensing? Have you started using it more? Have you always been using it?
Right. Just Kunal, I just want to ensure that I am well heard. There's no signal problem as such.
Absolutely, you are loud and clear. Yeah.
Great. So I think I cannot agree more with what George has said, with what Dr. Gomaa has said. And I think with the evolving consumer behavior, demand sensing is actually about balancing the art and science of picking up the short-term trends that we are seeing in the immediate future and obviously in the current future, so that we are able to better predict what our consumers will actually want. What they want, when they want, where they want is again very important with this. So instead of working with the traditional ways of forecasting, wherein we are looking at the same forecast for a month, or we are empowered to challenge that forecast with the latest sales data that we have and make some improvements into it. So I think from where it differs from time series forecasting and the traditional forecasting methods is that it makes us more resilient. It overcomes the latency issues that come with traditional forecasting methods. And it also gives us a goal to reduce the time, the total time elapsed between the emergence of a demand signal to the planner's ability to respond intelligently to those signals. So the foundational step will be therefore to balance between demand sensing as a tool and time series forecasting in such a way that, you know, we delve deeper into the data correlated with sources of demand intelligence, and drive demand beyond just seasonality and sales. So I think relying on these rather than historical data alone is what will finally give us the right evolution for demand forecasting that COVID has actually accelerated drastically for us.
Perfect. I think again you picked out a very important word here, which is that how do we do it based on short-term trend rather than, you know, a long time series. And another important area you touched upon was agility, which we will come back to, because that's what we, I think, want to discuss more. So Mohamed, how are things in Egypt with all the white goods trading and washing machine? What has it impacted for you there? Let's hear more on that.
Actually, before we go to the special industry like washing machine or anything else, actually in Egypt or also in the Middle East itself, the behavior of the consumer changes from day to day. Actually, the consumer or the product customer itself become more educated than before. So this educated customer become more let's say challenging to be acquired actually from the companies and from the products itself. Before we go to the competition, also it's become more tough and tough nowadays. But yes, the consumer itself also had let's say his own let's say opinion about the products. Let's say yes, this year everything changed. The availability of the products also was very important factor that affects the challenge and the competition in the market. But so far, yes, we sense that the sensitivity of the demand becomes more high and high in these days. Actually, for let's say products like home appliances in general or small appliances as well, it's become very sensitive to the market changes this year and last year, especially when we start to sense the information technology updates and the impact of the augmented reality in our market and the e-commerce as well.
Right. I think again a very valid point. The angle of technology which you brought in. I think again we'll come back to that. I would like to go back to Komal. Komal, just to understand, you're from the world leader industry of multi-level marketing. I mean, I always kind of was very intrigued in terms of figuring out how Amway actually manages this complex level of supply chain. The products made out of, I don't know, US, your consumer, after 10 layers getting into a household, you deal with all those, I think, health supplements, which obviously is the very key thing these days. So how do you actually, just to get a little more insight into this complex supply chain, how do you actually do your demand planning? What do you exactly do there?
So quickly, I'll quickly introduce everyone to how our supply chain is structured and in fact how multi-level marketing works as a business model. We have a pyramidal structure in terms of in the front end, which means that we have a key distributor who we call as the Amway business owner. So each Amway business owner is actually an owner of the organization, and they have legs under them. Or we can call them the chain that they build as a result of multi-level marketing. So what we are doing here is that we are transferring demand from one layer to the other. And therefore, all of the demand in the entire pyramidal structure actually culminates to the total demand that we receive as a monthly demand. Now, how a supply chain is, why our supply chain is actually complex is because we have very specialty products. 50 to 60% of our product portfolio is actually focused towards immunity and nutrition, which is now the key buzzword in the last 2-3 months in the COVID era. And our FG is actually, our finished goods is actually made from very distinct raw materials, which have lead times as high as, around 360 days or more. So we have lead times ranging from 7 days for local sources to raw materials which are, which have a greater than 360 days lead time, because we start from the seed requirement. We sow the seeds at the time of in the on season, and then that is how we source those raw materials right from the source. So we have a seed to supplement story there. So our supply chain is extremely complex, and that is why it makes it even more important for us to pick up those demand signals at the right time. So during this pandemic period, we've seen a sudden uncertainty, whether it is with respect to supply chain deliverables or customer product preferences, or simply job opportunities. So we coined a term called what's in. So I stands for immunity and N stands for nutrition. Now that was a product portfolio that we are now focused towards in the COVID era. So when we say 50 to 60% of our product portfolio is geared towards nutrition and wellness, preventive health, fitness and hygiene, the business model itself actually gives us some direction into why the demand signals would vary versus other industries. So the business model actually also provides employment to customers. So you see there are two ways the demand would be captured. One is from the demand of immunity and hygiene products, or from the demand of products in a portfolio. And the second would be the demand that is captured as a result of extending employment to other customers in the multi-level marketing models. So the tool that we have actually, I would say, it's not a tool actually, it's a process. The process that we have started to build in is go for a collaborative demand planning, where we are increasing the sales adoption and ownership of the forecast. So the sales organization being the front enders of the supply chain, and they are the most aware of risks and opportunities emerging in the market. We place a greater ownership of forecast on them. We try to pick up all the point of sale information and quickly turn them around into demand signals and plug it into our tool so that it gives us the most reasonable forecast numbers.
One thing, sorry to cut you, but one thing you said was very interesting, which actually is very relatable to demand planning and to our topic today. Now you said 50 to 60% portfolio is based on immunity and wellness. Now I kind of want to understand from a future perspective. You obviously would have seen a immense growth in that category, right? In last few months,
Absolutely.
probably, I don't know, 5x, 10x. It's in few 100%. I'm assuming, rather than 2-digit growth. So maybe 3 or 4-digit percentage growth. My actually question would be, now this is where it comes back to our topic. Do we look at demand sensing, or are we looking at time series? What will be next year your plan? Would you be looking at this year's data? How would you be predicting? Now, will you wrap up your manufacturing forever for next? Is it a trend? Is it something that you take it as permanent? What would you do for this?
Right. So I will split this up into two parts. One is obviously the short term, what we are trying to do, and the second would be long term, as in what we will do in the future, looking at the current trend. So today we are seeing a sudden rise in demand. We can do nothing but increase the demand as soon as possible, respond to those demand changes, quickly incorporate them in the plans, and move forward. And that is how we make the supply chain more agile. So we are incorporating those demand signals today and moving forward. Whether it is with respect to immunity hygiene products, where we are seeing a 4 to 5 times increase in the demand versus regular consumption, or it is with respect to cutting down the demands on other SKUs like beauty or personal care, where you're not seeing as much demand because of this work from home trend. So we are capturing those demand signals in the short term. Now, in the long term, we will look at a more hybrid approach, wherein we will use demand sensing along with the traditional forecasting methods. Obviously, we cannot do away with historical data. That's like a treasure for us. You cannot just say that the historical data is absolutely irrelevant going forward, because there are demand factors that are hidden in it. Right. And so we have to pick up those demand causal factors to address.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be a mix. It'll be an intelligent mix of both the models.
Right. Right. I'll actually move on to Dr. Gomaa now. I want to understand, Dr. Gomaa, you mentioned already it's a extremely competitive industry. Snacking changes every day. People preferences changes every day. How with this change and with this absolute fluctuating demand within your product categories, and I being a consumer and changing my mind almost on a daily basis, how do you maintain or achieve agility now within your supply chain? Still making sure that you are able to cater to this huge market in terms of the whole Middle East, Africa market that you're managing. How do you achieve the agility?
Okay, so when we talk about agility and forecasting, we're with a big cluster like Middle East and Pakistan, we have to understand that we cannot handle it centrally. We cannot handle it with the same way or in the same way for all the countries. So what happened is we have a breakdown of countries, and each country has its own dynamics based on the business model, and based on the route to market design. Yeah, so from some markets we have distributor who is accountable to do the sensing and understanding of the area and so on. In some markets we have direct distribution where we reach to our customers, consumers and customers directly by our force and so on. So based on each country, the model is changing. It's not the same. When we try to say agility, definitely agility will come by how better we can anticipate what the consumer will like. Yeah, and in this case we can definitely depend more on the signal we are getting from the market, which is through the techniques of capturing the like AC Nielsen data, the competition data, the information from the our customers base, which give us indication of price elasticity, competition or competitor activities in the market, and how we can react faster. This is number one. Number two, we have flexibility in how we do our promotions. Snacking business is not only about individual products. It depends by big percentage of what type of promotion you're gonna do. I can say in average, I think all the audience would know we have biscuits, chocolates, gum and candy, meals. We have different types of snacking here. But on average, we can say 60 to 80% of the business as a category regionally here in Middle East is depending on promotions, consumer promotions. To be more agile and to be more flexible, we have the product semi-finished good already for type of promotion, and we decide the promotion closer to the market. So this is also depending on the situation. On every week we can decide, okay, what is the next week type of promotion, and we accordingly react. That gives us higher response rate and being more agile in the market. So forecasting plus the operational model, which I talked about, both together help us in the area of agility.
Right. So I think what you're saying, basically, you obviously with 60 to 80% based on promotion, you follow more of a push model than the pull model. Yeah. So you can kind of more or less in a way also decide what product to move, what product to hold. Exactly. Okay. I think with the scale and with the market share that you have, definitely possible. I think that brings me to another player in the industry, George, who's pretty much a very big market share in terms of automobiles and tire industry. George, I actually want to ask you more to do with planning as a function. What do you think, where the planning as a function, demand planning specifically, do you see it fitting in the organization? I mean, in my experience, it's becoming more and more out of supply chain. You know, I see this every day now. Everybody in operation is relying more on planning than they were ever before. You know, you go and ask them question, they say, why don't you go and ask for planning? So I wanted to get your view, because you are again a market leader in your category and managing a pretty big area of supply chain. Where are you seeing this kind of a trend within yourself or within the industry?
Yes, Kunal, and thanks for that question, because I think that's probably one of the big inflections with the crisis. More and more planning and demand planning per se is becoming the center of the business, because I think someone said it in one of the sessions previously, 93 or 94% of the Fortune 1000 companies have been impacted on supply or supply related activities during the crisis. So it pretty much brought to the center the importance of supply chain, the importance of planning, and the importance of planning in executing the business in a very gray environment. Because probably no one person or no one team has the solution to win on the market going forward, because there is no reference anymore. So it's more collective intelligence. It's more what is the decisions we take on the ground and how well they are coordinated together that will make a difference. Dr. Gomaa was just talking about promotions that they will do at the last moment, which pretty much drives 60 to 70% of their sellout.
Yes.
Komal was talking about the different leg structures, and everyone is pretty much interdependent on the other. So planning becomes, I would say, a central function, much more corporate, much less, I would say, detail oriented, but much more driving the future. Because this is potentially a function now that could make or break your business in the next few months. Because you hold too much of stock, you pretty much lock in working capital. You could potentially lose sales if you don't have enough of stock of the right element, or if your sales team are pushing products that you don't have, it's pretty much money thrown out of the window. So all of this is linked to planning, and it's pretty much become the center of operations as of today, given the uncertainty that we are working with on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely, I think well said, and I completely agree. I think it's great to see more and more importance given to supply chain professionals, and specifically demand planning guys. They are becoming more and more known and prevalent, if I can put it that way, and which is good to know. I think that actually brings me to Mohamed now. Mohamed, you actually took out the point initially about the consumer behavior and the change of consumer behavior, how difficult it is becoming, even in the white good space. So I would like to get your views on, one is how is this affected your industry, especially during the pandemic? What trends did you see? And you also mentioned kind of use of IT and technology. I kind of wanted to know, is that something you are doing as an organization? Is it something you're looking at in future? I think it'll be interesting to know your perspective there.
Yes, yes. In general, in home appliances industry, the e-commerce and the online sales are not heavy like different industries. For example, in many different products. But that's why, because our type of the products should be physically inspected. Let's say to be viewed by the customers physically in the stores and the showrooms and so on. But we surprised in last 2 years or 3 years that started the grow up of the e-commerce and the online sales started to grow from time to time, which is let's say surprising for us, because this type of products should be, as we mentioned, be physically viewed. But yes, we see this grow up on this market will turn all the directions from demand perspectives bottom up, because now you see you surprised a lot of sales orders for overnight. We receive it overnight when we are sleeping, and we surprised by these volumes in the morning. So yes, this online will change the model of our sales, or let's say demand planning or demand channels will be different in next 2 years, maybe next year as well. More than this, we also have an input of the how we can make the life easier for our customers by applying some information technology tools in order to make the sales easier than before, and without going to the point of sale of the store and so on. We try to apply some technologies applications like augmented reality and like also virtual reality in order to make the sales transaction easier through the online application, online websites. Last not least, also we need to add in the point of the demand planning. Yes, we also in our organization are driven by the demand, so we are demand-driven organization, and putting here also as well our customer in the middle of all our activity inside the organization.
Right. Thank you, Mohamed. I agree actually to that point, but I think coming back to Komal, Komal, you already mentioned you're doing a mix currently, like a hybrid model of demand sensing and the traditional time series forecasting model. Where do you see, again, this demand sensing? Is this something that you think it's temporary? You think it's become the future, or you think it's going to be a hybrid model? Where do you think now, coming back to the topic of the future of supply and demand planning, what are you doing? Any new changes, or what are the plans for a long term, rather medium and long term? See, short term we all are doing more like a crisis management, I would put it. This pandemic situation has made every supply chain become a kind of a firefighter more than anything else. So all of us have done whatever it takes to meet the demand of the customer, whether it's high or low. I mean, whether it's high demand, you work on the FG. There is a low demand, you're working on your raw material, but you are still juggling between one area or the other. So I think definitely we've all seen a major crisis management during last few months, but I'm now more keen on looking at, when we slowly come out of this, are these trends, is this the way we do the whole demand planning? Is this something that is changing? I mean, I kind of want to run it with this question through the panel. So let's start with you, Komal. What do you think? You're not audible, Komal. Sorry. Are you on mute? No.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was.
Okay,
So
perfect. Yeah,
I was saying, great question there. Yes. So I think I would not call demand sensing as a tool for sure. It is, I would like to see it as a process that, wherein we are able to leverage a high level of data granularity, which is as close to as possible to the end customer. Then extending supply chain visibility by looking at those patterns in point of sales, promotion, like Dr. Gomaa said, any social media trends that we are seeing to make those near-term improvements in the forecast, and inventory placement. So how do we leverage that? We need to integrate into our daily monitoring process. And I think there cannot be a better platform than S&OP to ensure that demand review becomes a robust part of that process. And we are dealing with demand very seriously and proactively. So that is one thing I think it has to be made, it has to be integrated into our sales and operations planning process. And secondly, we shift our focus from forecast accuracy to ensuring that we are improving on forecastability, which means that we are trying to establish more and more correlation between the various demand signals that we are seeing today, and also associating it with the demand signals that we have seen in the past using historical data. So I think these two things will help us reduce demand uncertainty, and it will enable those critical adjustments in the forecast without without us waiting for the next forecast cycle to kick in.
Right. So I kind of, Komal, I agree and disagree to an extent. Why I'm saying this? See, I think another point I'd like to bring across on the table, and I want now views from George and Dr. Gomaa probably on this. See, what this pandemic has also done is given everybody, including the management, a flavor of the level of agility where supply chain can go. See, whatever said and done, you just said that 50-60% I think increase your product categories on these two, immunity and wellness, which means you've seen 10 times spike or whatever, 5 times spike, but somehow you've managed to meet the demand. I'm sure it is the same for Dr. Gomaa and for white goods. We have all shown results which are also unprecedented when it comes to how a regular supply chain is done. And I would actually give that credit hugely to this demand sensing process, which is obviously basing everything on short term. So won't there be an expectation now, George, more, or Dr. Gomaa, more from a corporate perspective? Won't your top management or higher management is going to say, when you could make it work for a few months, is it not that something can be becoming a trend going forward? I think that's what I want to understand. This is about now the new expectation setting. So Dr. Gomaa, what do you think about this?
So in order to explain the new expectations, we have to explain what is previous expectations, right? So Mondelēz globally, they follow the Oliver White model since a couple of years. We designed the integrated business planning process across globe, and we followed that Oliver White model through a gold APO model. So we implemented APO across the regions, and we started to have some phases and stages of how to develop the phases of APO development until we reach to the full implementation of all the modules where we run demand planning through APO. And running demand planning through APO is not something new. I think everyone is aware of. But briefly, you have a baseline based on history and building blocks. These building blocks are all the demand drivers which affect the demand. How accurate you are to understand those demand drivers in the history to be able to predict them in the future, this is how your forecasting accuracy will be improving, and it will differ from country to country, region to region, depend on the business model. So this is how we run it for a couple of years. This is based on last 2 years minimum data, right? Now in the epidemic, COVID situation and all of that, we need to know more about, okay, what happened last month, what happened 3 months ago, what are the recent changes in the market, what are the innovative reactions happened by the competition to be able to react quickly. How actually we as a company can find innovative solutions from branding, from marketing, from ideas of products and so on. So it is really, we start to think out of the box to build on these historical solutions or ways of working to be more proactive into the market, to stay as a market leader. And as you know, Mondelēz is the #1 snacking company globally, so we have to stay as a market leader. So how to be on top of the game? So this is where the techniques of looking at the consumer behavior, looking at demand sensing, understanding the changes in the behavior in the market based on the economy, based on the regulations, based on the change in segmentation of the consumer base. All of this is a recent important topics which we added now to the agenda, which was not happening intensively before.
Right. George, what is your take on the same? What changes have you done in your planning? Short term, long term, medium term?
I think a couple of changes that, like you, Kunal, I think are here to stay, because the bar is much higher, and typically no one in top management would like to lower the bar. So the bar is only going to get higher. Just adding on to what Dr. Gomaa said, if I were to simplify, there's probably two inflections that are coming in terms of the expectation. The first one is around data and the consumer. I'm not talking about the customer, because like Mondelēz, in some markets we work with distributors. But then, do you know who buys from a distributor and what their actions would be? I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And so we are leveraging a lot more different kinds of data to get even feeble signals. And it's going to be a first mover advantage on the market, because people are going to have less to spend. But when they decide to spend on something or spend on your product, you better have it in stock, because they're not going to wait for much longer for 2 months more or 3 months more, because there is uncertainty. So we've got to understand, moving away from a B2B, from a B2C kind of mindset to a B2I kind of mindset, which is driven by a lot more data with a lot more granularity. So that's the first big change that's going to happen, because and that's happening already. So the kind of data we are looking at is more consumer based versus, I would say, historical or those kind of trends. And like Dr. Gomaa mentioned, it's not one size fits all, because it would be very different for a market like India versus a market like the Middle East versus a market like Africa, because the kind of feeble signals you get from each of those markets may be very different. The second, I think, big inflection on demand sensing are the kind of talents you want, because it's no longer the same kind of job. You need to be people, you need to have people capable of managing and speaking to different kind of functions, probably more with marketing, exchanging more with sales, but with higher business acumen, to be able to translate what we are seeing in terms of more actionable results on the ground and putting on the table what's in it for the company. So I see probably an opportunity for sales guys to come into supply chain, and that's the greatest opportunity to democratize supply chain across the company. So those are the two big things I would add in addition to what Dr. Gomaa mentioned. And vice versa.
Very,
so maybe we'll have a future CEO
of a big
company coming from supply chain.
From supply chain. I was just going to say that I think that is what is more interesting to see, that it's actually, I mean, it's a good thing that not only planning is becoming a more recognized operation or a function. I think overall supply chain and the agility is the name of the game now. I think pretty much, if you even look at the bigger players in terms of e-commerce, if you look at, you don't have agility without talking about Amazon. But if you look at those kind of agility, all the whole focus is on making sure that like I think Mohamed mentioned, the consumer is so much smarter, right? Consumers are becoming smarter by the day. So to meet the expectation, making sure that we are meeting that bar, and which is getting raised every day, and still moving on and making sure all the supply chain is working, the right product is at the right time for the consumer to pick up. Otherwise, there is too much competition in the market. I think it's a great way of putting it that way. I think Mohamed, you coming back to your point of the consumer becoming smarter, what is your view on this? Are you investing more in technology, or what are you doing to keep the market share? I mean, Electrolux is also a very old brand. So how are you kind of making sure? You said we have huge dependency on the demand, I mean consumer demand. So are you doing anything in that area to either up the demand, or making sure that there are more variables which are getting controlled in your demand planning?
Yes, exactly. We start to give the support to this function to plan demand planning by, let's say, investing more in customer relationship management, and to extend our arms from B2B relationship to B2B2C, actually, even in the channels we are distributing by, not by ourselves, but we started to put our sensors, or to put our let's say data collection methods and tools in these markets, in order to collect more information as much as possible from our supplier, our customers, and also the feedback from our customers. This is first point, actually. So we started to invest more in CRM, and also from other side, we started to, let's say, push different products, new technology in our new features in our products, and this put more challenges in supply chain, as you know, when it comes to more, let's say, the product life cycle. Actually, now the product life cycle become more shorter than before. And this put the challenges in the supply chain, actually, in the market, and also from the supply perspectives. But this impacted very positively on the market share, actually, the last 2 years. Last not least, actually, to transfer the setup and the process from the isolated islands, demanded channels to be into the one control tower, actually, the control tower strategy. And you know how much is very important to have this centralized and integrated demand planning tool. So now we have a lot of actions in order to be more closer to our market, as mentioned.
Yeah, thank you, Mohamed. I think we have some questions coming in from the audience now. I think this one is specifically for you, George. It's from Shiba Pathak. The question is, tires and wheels are being looked at as innovative R&D experiment in incorporating piezoelectric sensors that basically convert kinetic energy movement to electricity. Now, do you see this industry and category to lead the way towards automobile renewable energy adoptions, and or an ally to the EV platform? So that's specifically, okay. I mean, if you understood what she means, yeah, please.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, and it's very pointed, but I think it's something that could potentially change all our lives in the future. Like many of you know, electric vehicles, pretty much their capacity to transport, or the capacity to use electric vehicles, is dependent largely on what is their distance they can travel on one charge. And a lot of that energy that is being spent to drive from A to B is because of the resistance that the tires have on the ground. So pretty much all of the innovation that will come in terms of sustainability, be it CO2 emissions, be it increase in, I would say, a range of electric vehicles, will come partly through tires, because that's one of the biggest levers, the other one being battery technology. So actually, Michelin, for example, is working with Tesla. Most of Tesla vehicles are fitted with Michelin tires. It's not by hazard, it's because we are pretty much the leaders in tire technology for electric vehicles. Most of the vehicles we sell to truck manufacturers worldwide now, linking to Euro 6, Euro 7 norms, The reason they buy our tires is because it's the easiest way to reduce CO2 emissions versus investing in motor or motor technology and having lower emissions. So it's a green way. It's going to help the electric vehicle revolution, but at the same time, it's something that you don't see or think about every day, but an integral part of everything that that is coming forward on mobility, I would say, per se. Because the same you can start thinking about on bicycles, you can start thinking about on two-wheelers, you can start thinking about on anything that moves. And that's why Michelin more and more is positioning itself as a mobility company versus just as a tire company.
Great. Thanks, George. Shiba, I hope that answers your questions. We have another question from Uday Shashital. I think probably Dr. Gomaa, this one can be for you. Will the planning dynamics change in modular algorithms so that the supply chain official can take corrective measures before the crisis hit the inventory levels?
I think this is something ongoing, and in regards to economy impact and how the government will react, there are a couple of actions which are happening now, which they're trying to work on, and definitely this is something going to reflect in the future, because economy is impacted dramatically by this epidemic, and accordingly all these changes need to be reflected in all the regulations and the rules and everything. So this is something definitely they are working on now intensively.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gomaa. Another question is from Michelle Al-Haddad, which is, why has the demand planning become at the forefront during the pandemic? I think, which is what we were discussing, Michelle, but okay, because of the uncertainty he's asking, or hence I can assume that without a crisis, we are very supply-driven organization, not maybe demand-driven. That's what I believe, that's a question. So Komal, would you like to take that?
Sure, Kunal. So I think it has to be a balance between being a demand-driven organization and a supply-driven organization. Yes, going by the current demand trends, where we see a sudden demand change in certain products, we cannot say that we will completely do away with demand being a demand-driven process. So yes, being a demand-driven supply chain and a supply balancing supply chain is what we will have in the future.
Great. I think that pretty much answers all our questions here from the audience. I would like to invite Dr. Rakesh, Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, are you with us? It'll be nice to have a quick, I know you've been part of the audience and listening to our views. If you would like to join in to have your views also on the subject, it'll be great before we close.
This was fairly, well brought about issues, but I have a little observation that happens in organization, because I do not work anywhere in an organization, so I may not have an inside view of the organization. But there is a little bit of concern that I see when you look at organizational planning processes. And when you look at above the line and below the line, dilemmas, organizations are moving very fast towards above the line. That's change management, IBP, sales and operation planning. But when you look at below the line, the complexity of aligning short-run forecasting with the larger organizational need, I think there's a huge gap. And that gap is primarily because the large amount of uncertainty that resides within your supply chain emerges there. And this is where I think one of the basic elements that we really need to answer here is that how do we reduce the demand plan variability versus the sales variability that you have. And I think what Komal was saying was perfectly all right, that do we have a mechanism to gauge? I will not say sense and signal, but gauge demand planning, sales forecast or demand forecast, which would become more a signal to help organization align themselves, align their end to realities, as I said earlier in one of the panels, that that's what is emerging. And what does it mean? It means that one needs to forecast, one needs to get the information from the system, one needs to do what if analysis, one needs to build even short-term scenarios, unique probability distribution, and one also needs to have an inside out view of promotions, discount, and how they're going to disrupt everything, including competition, that data that is there. So I think major problems still exist there, and more variability that organizations see is below the line, though they are attempting through the sales and operation processes to reduce that. I think this is what I thought adding would be more helpful rather than summing up. I think it was very well done.
Absolutely. I think, thank you, Dr. Singh. I think I think you summed it up. So thanks for doing that for me. I think we had a very good session. I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking out time and for sharing their views. And it was really insightful. Great. I think we touched upon quite a few things. We started with obviously what is demand sensing, how are we using it, and I think exactly what we wanted to take out of this session we've clearly addressed in terms of where is demand sensing. So we clearly understand demand sensing is more like how we utilize the short-term trends to look at forecasting versus the long-term time series, longer historic models. How now with the future of supply chain is not only going to be based purely on demand sensing or purely on time series. I think there are more factors than just demand sensing to it. Like I think some of our panelists took out that we have now new variables which were never there. There are a lot of consumer behavior. There is consumer smartness, intelligence, which is factored into the whole forecasting process, which we have figured out. So I think overall, of course, use of technology is a very big tool now. So overall, I think one thing I'm pretty proud of being a supply chain professional, and that we also addressed how supply chain as a function and specifically within that demand planning is coming up and pretty much becoming more of a corporate function than just being a within supply chain, which is a great thing to have. And yeah, this is something which is it's kind of a constantly evolving process and a field. I mean, with always the basics being statistical in terms of the tool that we have, which will always remain as a strong base for any demand planner. We will have to have these external factors. It has to become more and more kind of accommodating in terms of getting these variables in and adapting to the new changes as we move along. I think that's how I'd like to sum across. And again, thanks everybody for being part of such a wonderful panel. It was really an enjoyable and insightful session. Thank you so much. Back over to you, Jaisil. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Kunal.
you.
Bang on time. Yeah, thank you.